Here's how I ended my struggle with binge eating disorder. So, as a teenager, as a kid even, I think it was from about the age of 8 onwards, all the way up till I was about 18 or so, I'd always struggled with these periodic episodes of binge eating. So like basically eating until I wanted to throw up, but I couldn't. And then I would be in this massive cycle for about 10 years of trying to diet the extra weight that I had off because I was overweight, and then go back to binge eating. Maybe that would last for about a week, maybe even longer, and then I'd be back to dieting really, really hard, where I was only eating, fruits, vegetables, lean meats, wholemeal bread, like so-called clean food. And then the big breakthrough for me happened, I think, in my early 20s, was when I started getting into the whole concept of flexible dieting. So essentially eating whatever you want once you've hit certain targets in terms of your caloric intake, protein, etc. Right? So tracking with apps like myFitnessPal, and I got really into the whole bodybuilding scene, even though, as you can see, I am not a bodybuilder. I definitely don't have the genetics for it, but I think a lot of the great lessons we've learned about how fat loss works, how building muscle works, has come from that sport of bodybuilding and has carried over into pretty much the entire fitness industry in terms of how we, generally prescribe different ways of eating or different training programs for people when it comes to achieving their fat loss goals. For example, we've deduced that one of the most efficient ways to train, even if you're looking for fat loss, is to train more like a bodybuilder than, let's say, back in the 90s or the early 2000s, you would have been put on much more cardio intensive training programs, even if your goal was fat loss, right? So we've figured out a lot of truths about how fat loss works thanks to the sport of bodybuilding. Flexible dieting was definitely a huge one in terms of, just knowing that you need certain caloric intake, certain protein intake, and then you're pretty much good to go in terms of losing body fat. That was a huge breakthrough for me because, as you can see right now, I'm drinking a cappuccino, got a few sugars in there. That's something I really like to fit into my diet on a daily basis, even if my goal is for fat loss. And yeah, just that breakthrough, that aha moment of seeing, eating for fat loss as being the exact same as if somebody was aiming at a goal, let's say like they wanted to afford their first house, they would have to make out a budget, they would have to cut down on some discretionary spending and make sure that their longer term goal was looked after, and then they could spend money on, say, beer or nights out with their friends or whatever. It's the exact same principle, just carried over into budgeting total caloric intake. And then once the important things are squared away, then you have more flexibility. One of the errors I made, though, I think, through flexible dieting, and I think it's a very common error, is that when you first get that breakthrough, that aha moment that I can, in theory, eat whatever I want, that you actually you go out of your way, essentially, to try and eat more unclean foods as almost a form of rebellion, right? It's like, aha, I'm getting away with this. Whereas I'm starting to definitely realize that there's a lot of social situations, there's a lot of lifestyle, let's say, restrictions that you're still going to face if you're trying to fit as many unhealthy foods into your life, into your day-to-day life as possible, whilst also meeting your total calorie goals. Whereas, for example, if you were to, say, wake up in the morning and the first thing you did was consume 50 grams of protein, eating a breakfast that was maybe something like, I don't know, some oats with protein in it and a tub of cottage cheese on the side, maybe a bit of fruit, that gave you like a great start to the day, was highly satiating, low in calories. I feel like that's squaring away some of the important stuff so that you can leave more flexibility for social situations, for connection, right? I think that's the better way to do it. I think it's just a common error that we all make when we do have that breakthrough of I can eat whatever I want. It doesn't necessarily mean that you need to always max out your budget, is what I'm trying to say, every day just because you can. I think there's a lot to be said for delayed gratification, even if you're following a flexible dieting approach, where maybe you bank an extra 200 calories Monday to Friday, so that when you go out at the weekend, you don't really have to think about it if you're out for a few drinks or you're out for a meal with your friends, and you can have that social connection without being that awkward person in the room who's overly fixated on how many calories are in certain foods. Because at the end of the day, it is about a weekly average of how much you're eating. It's also about the average of your behaviors over the course of, weeks, months, years that compound into what kind of sustainable physique you're going to have moving forward. And I think that's the key to sustainable fat loss, is to budget in some of your social situations to keep them there so that you don't have to be that awkward person overly fixated on sticking to your diet. I think that makes for a more holistic life experience where you can still achieve your fat loss goals without anybody knowing that you're changing anything when you're out at your social events, out at the bar, with family or friends or whatever. Anyway, hope this was helpful and hope it gave you like a little bit of a different way of thinking about how you can maybe be a bit more strict with yourself during the days where you're not going to have a whole lot of social interaction, so that you can then make more time for the people and situations that matter to you while still achieving your fat loss goals.